English colonization. The southern colonies consisted of Virginia, Maryland, Georgia, and North and South Carolina.
The southern colonies. Geography. The geography of the southern colonies featured fertile soil, hilly coastal plains, forests, long rivers, and swamp areas. It was the warmest of the three regions, and the winters were not too cold, but the hot and humid summers gave rise to the spread of diseases. The warm climate made it possible to grow crops throughout the year and was ideally suited for plantations. Economy. The southern colony's economy was mostly based on commercial agriculture. The first colony, Jamestown, Virginia, tobacco became the South's first successful cash crop. It became the main cash crop primarily grown in Virginia, Maryland, and to a lesser extent, North Carolina. Rice, indigo, and cotton became the main cash crops in South Carolina, and rice was the cash crop to a lesser extent in Georgia. Since these cash crops needed the right environment and cultivation techniques, plantations were introduced. The use of indentured servants and labored slaves was introduced, who then became the backbone of the southern colony's economy. Community structures. The House of Burgesses. It was the first legislative and democratic form of government in all of the English colonies, which was first started in Virginia. It was a representative government which was run by a group of representatives and gave voting rights to all citizens. Societal structures. Gentries and social classes. The wealthy landowners, called the gentry, had enormous economic and political influence and usually represented their communities. As the wealth of the plantations and therefore the gentries increased, there started to become a division of social class within the southern colonies, especially found in South Carolina. The small group of wealthy gentries, or planter elite, would be at the top, and many poor backcountry farmers, landless tenant farmers, servants, and enslaved Africans at the bottom. Slavery and indentured servants. The demand for tobacco, rice, indigo, and other crops were greater than the supply, but there was plenty of land for farming but not enough labor to work it. To solve this problem, the gentries paid indentured servants to work their land through the head-right system, to work for 5 to 7 years and then let go. However, once the slaves were found to be more useful, since they were cheaper and wouldn't have to be let go, unlike the indentured servants, they were used. North Carolina and South Carolina. P.S. The reasons for forming were the same for each and also happened at the same time, so we grouped them both together. So, some Virginians grew tired of religious laws and moved just south of the border to start their own group. Soon after, the king granted some noblemen this land as a gift. They sent some settlers to colonize this area, and then some joined with the group that was already there. The settlement was called Carolina. Later in the century, due to strife within the colony, the noblemen sold the land back to the crown. It eventually separated into 2 separate colonies and then became North and South Carolina. It was mainly settled for the good farmland. Georgia. James Oglethorpe asked the king for a land charter, and his 2 reasons for settling there was for the people to start a new life after serving time in jail, and the other was to serve as a military base to defend against the Spanish. Virginia. The colonists chose to settle in Virginia in order to find gold and become rich. This is when the Virginia colony asked the Queen to lend them some boats and set sail into a colony that is now known as Virginia. They seek economic prosperity that they could not find in England and to create a fortune for themselves. Another reason to please the Queen was to convert the natives to Christianity. Maryland. Maryland was found to create a safe place for Roman Catholics who were still struggling against religious tyranny in England. They felt that if they were to leave, they would be free from religious conflicts. It was founded because Lord Baltimore saw an opportunity for profit.
The middle colonies consisted of Delaware, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Geography. They had warm summers and cold winters. The winters were not as harsh compared to New England. The climate and land were ideal for agriculture. The middle colonies had 3 wide rivers, the Hudson, Delaware, and Susquehanna rivers. The soil was exceptionally fertile, so it was adequate for farming, but was not suited for large-scale farming.
The economy. The economy of the middle colonies featured both aspects of New England, shipbuilding and lumbering industries, and the large farms from the south. The middle colonies were known as the breadbasket because of the large amounts of barley, wheat, oats, and rye that were grown. Their cash crop was mainly wheat. The three main rivers made the soil very rich and great for planting, and also made it very easy to move their goods to the coast for shipping to markets elsewhere in Europe or America. Hundreds of ships sailed up and down the region's river, exchanging European goods for wheat and flour. Towns located where the rivers emptied into the Atlantic Ocean rapidly grew into major cities, and the prosperity of the middle colonies allowed New York and Philadelphia to become the two largest colonies of the major 13. Community structure. Town hall. The form of government incorporated a number of democratic principles that reflected the basic rights of the Englishmen. However, they still relied more so on an authoritarian government. Each colony developed a system of self-government based upon an elected legislature, and even though the governor was selected by the king, the council and legislature was supplied by the colony. Social structure. So the Quakers. Quakers believed in equality and were not as religious as other members, so they faced religious persecution in England and in New England for their religious beliefs. After William Penn received land for what is now known as Pennsylvania, these Quakers would now have a place where they had freedom of religion. The presence of not only Quakers, but Mennonites, Lutherans, Dutch Calvinists, and Presbyterians made the dominance of one faith next to impossible. Social class. There were also distinct classes that were created in the middle colonies, but were not as defined or prominent compared to the southern colonies. At the top were wealthy entrepreneurs who owned large farms and other businesses. In the middle were many farmers who owned only a few acres and could only generate a small income from their land. At the bottom of the society were landless workers who either rented land from large landowners or worked for money. New York and New Jersey. They were also similar in terms of how they were founded. When the Duke of York received a New Netherland as a gift, it was renamed New York in his honor. He broke off 2 pieces of land given to him and gave them to 2 of his friends. This is how New Jersey was created. Pennsylvania. William Penn wanted his colony to be a place of religious freedom. Some of the first settlers were Welsh Quakers looking for a place where they could practice religion without persecution. William Penn was also a Quaker, so having this sort of religious freedom for them kind of meant a lot to him. And Delaware. The colonists chose to settle in Delaware due to the big trade between the 3 colonies and therefore allowed merchants and farmers to trade valuables.
The colonies of New England consisted of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. Geography. Colonists in the New England colonies endured long, cold winters and short yet mild summers. Land was flat close to the end of the coastline, but the further inland there were more mountains and dense forests. The soil was generally rocky, and the cold winters made farming difficult and unsuitable for most crops. However, the cold winters made disease less common compared to the warmer colonies. Economy. None of the crops grown in New England were of high demand, which resulted in an unsuitable for cash crops and large plantations. The long, cold winters and the rocky soil made farming difficult, so the main crop that could be grown was corn. Since they lived often the coastline near the Grand Banks, there was a lot of plankton, which attracted a lot of fish and whales to the area, such as cod, mackerel, halibut, and herring. As a result, fishing was an important source of income for the settlers, along with whaling for the use of its blubber. New England also had many good harbors and plenty of forests. There was also a fall line, which caused waterfalls, where they could use it to power sawmills. The importance of this is that the lumber that is cut at these sawmills could easily be transported downriver to the coast and shipped to the other colonies to trade. Barrel making was also an important industry because they could be used to store and ship almost everything. Community structure. The town hall and town meetings. It represents the democratic form of government, and this is where the town residents would meet to discuss local problems and issues. These town meetings developed into the local town government, and they created a system with selectmen to manage the town's affairs and could appoint any other needed officials. This is important because unlike the farmers in England, the settlers in New England were allowed to directly participate in their own local government. This leads to the development of a strong belief that they had the right to govern themselves. Meeting house or churches. The Puritans in the New England colonies were very religious, and their houses were always close to a meeting house. For this reason, the community would come together for Sunday worship, sermons, and Thursday night religious lectures. Social structure. The Puritan Society. The Puritans were a religious minority group who wanted to reform the Church of England and return to Europe with a new and improved religion. The weekly sermons and lectures forced the Puritans' obedience to comply to strict rules and to regulate most normal daily activities. They felt a sense of responsibility for the moral welfare of their neighbors, so anyone that would go against their faith would be punished. This shows the importance of religion in the New England colonies. Massachusetts. This was the colony that was first formed by the Puritans. They came over to escape British rule. They settled here because they wanted to purify the Church of England and then return with a new and improved religion that, unlike in Europe, was thought to have similar aspects to Catholicism. Because of this, Puritans did not agree with the Church of England and thus escaped to Massachusetts in order to practice their own religion. This group decided that everything should be developed by the people. They wanted their government to be a democracy. They believed the people that had the right to say what happened to them and who ruled over them. Rhode Island. When Roger Williams wanted to make changes in religion to Massachusetts, the government did not take it very well. They banished him to England, but instead he went to live with the Native Americans somewhere else. Anyone else who believed in the right to have a different religious faith and have religious freedom would come here. After asking the king for a grant of land, Rhode Island was established. Connecticut was mostly made up of people looking for freedom from government, people looking to earn their fortune, and people just coming to the New World. There was a lot of religious people, as there were in all the colonies at that time. This was another place where people were looking to start over. New Hampshire, not in search of religious freedom, but rather to seek their fortunes through trade with England, primarily in fish, fur, and timber. The land was given to John Mason, and he decided to make a colony with it. Thank you for listening and watching. Sorry it was so long.